Parents sold my car for golden child sister as a compensation for her divorce. So, I guess I should start by saying that this whole mess happened because I just wanted to visit my parents. I hadn't seen them in a few months, and honestly, I thought everything was fine between us. You know, normal stuff, just busy with life. Plus, my dad had been complaining about his heart acting up again, which is always their go-to reason for getting me to drive down. Like, hey, your dad's not doing great. You should come see us before something happens. Classic. So, being the good daughter that I am, I figured I'd make the 6-hour drive to see them. Now, here's where things get tricky. My boyfriend, Patricia, had just bought this shiny new SUV. He's been saving up for it for like 2 years and he was super proud of it. You know the type of car that looks so good that you feel like a celebrity driving it? That's his car. He's had it for a couple of months and he lets me drive it sometimes because I had to put my old car in the shop. Some stupid thing with the engine I don't really get. Anyway, I asked Patricia if I could take his car for the weekend trip to my parents and he was cool with it. So I get to my parents' house and everything's pretty normal at first. We're catching up, talking about the usual stuff, how my job's going, how life's been since Patricia moved in with me last month. And of course, they ask about the car because it's hard not to notice how fancy it looks sitting in their driveway. I didn't think much of it when they asked whose car it was, so I just casually said, "Yeah, it's mine," which in hindsight was the dumbest thing I've ever said. But honestly, why would it matter, right? I mean, we're family. It's just a car. Fast forward to day 4 of my visit. I decided to meet up with a friend for lunch, one of those old high school friends who you only talk to a couple of times a year but still feel close to. So I'm out for a few hours, and when I come back to my parents' house, I notice something weird right away. The car's gone. At first, I thought maybe my dad took it for a spin, which seemed kind of unlikely because his health isn't the best. But whatever, I didn't panic right away. So I go inside and ask, "Hey, where's the car?" My mom's just standing there in the kitchen, super casual, like nothing's wrong, and she's like, "Oh, we sold it." I'm sorry, what? For a second, I thought she was joking. Like, who sells someone's car without asking them? Especially not your daughter's car, right? So I laughed, like, "No, seriously, where's the car?" But she wasn't laughing. She was dead serious. "We sold it," she said again, as if it was the most normal thing in the world. I remember just staring at her, waiting for her to say it was a prank or something, but then my dad came in and backed her up, saying they got a pretty good price for it. I think I blacked out for a second, because it took me a minute to understand what was happening. They had sold Patricia's car. My boyfriend's brand new SUV that he saved for years to buy. They sold it. Just like that. When I finally started processing it, I was like, "What the hell do you mean you sold it? It's not even yours." And then my dad goes, "Well, you said it was yours, so we figured it was okay." I couldn't even form words like, who does that? Who sells a car without even checking if it's, legally theirs to sell? They start explaining how they took pictures of the car, sent them to some friends, and found a buyer who was willing to pay a lot for it. I asked them how much they got, and they said, "Oh, we gave the money to your sister. She needed a break after the divorce." At this point, my brain was short-circuiting. My sister? The same sister who has barely spoken to me in years? The same sister who lives out of state and never even bothers to visit unless she needs something? They sold the car to fund her vacation because she needed a break. I was livid. I started yelling at them, asking what the hell they were thinking. And you know what they said? "Well, you're doing well for yourself. You can buy another one. But your sister? She really needed this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They sold Patricia's car to give my sister a vacation and some jewelry, or whatever else they bought with the money. And they really thought that was okay because I was doing well. I told them they screwed up big time. Like, they had no idea what kind of trouble they were in. But instead of apologizing, they turned it around on me. My mom goes, "Well, if you'd just been honest and told us it wasn't your car, we wouldn't have sold it. This is really your fault for not telling us the truth." My fault? My fault? They were acting like I was the one who messed up. Like, I was the bad guy for not giving them all the details about the car. I mean, sure, I shouldn't have lied and said it was mine. But come on, who sells a car without even asking first? And then they had the nerve to say I should have been honest because family doesn't lie to each other. At this point, I was shaking. I called Patricia right there in front of them and told him everything. My parents just stood there, looking horrified as I explained to him that his car was gone. Patricia was pissed, of course, but he tried to stay calm. He told me he'd handle it, but there was no way he wasn't pressing charges. And honestly, I agreed. I told my parents that if they didn't get the car back, Patricia was going to sue them, and I was going to help him. They started panicking, telling me not to do anything drastic. My mom was crying, saying, "You wouldn't hurt your own parents, would you? We're family." But at that point, I didn't care. They sold a car that wasn't even mine to sell. They betrayed me, betrayed Patricia, and acted like they were the victims. I left their house that day, completely numb, knowing things were never going to be the same. After I left my parents' house that day, I knew things were about to get messy. I was so angry. But it wasn't just about the car anymore. It was about the fact that my parents couldn't see how wrong what they did was. And on top of that, they had the audacity to blame me for their screw-up, like I was the one who made this whole thing happen. But anyway, I didn't have time to sit around and stew in my anger. I had to figure out what to do next. Patricia was understandably pissed, and the more I thought about it, the worse I felt for him. He had worked so hard to save up for that car. He deserved better than having his car sold off without even knowing it. It was like everything was happening in slow motion, and I was stuck in this nightmare of a situation I couldn't control. First things first, I called my parents and told them to get the car back. I didn't care what they had to do. Call the buyer, offer them more money, whatever it took. They had no choice. But of course, they started in with the excuses. My dad was all, "Oh, we already gave your sister the money and we don't want to upset her." Are you serious? I don't know what my sister's deal is, but she always somehow gets away with everything. It's like my parents have a permanent blind spot when it comes to her. The second she says she's upset or needs something, they're ready to bend over backward to make sure she's happy. But me? I'm just supposed to be the responsible one who has to understand everyone else's problems. This time, though, I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I told them straight up that if they didn't get the car back, Patricia was going to press charges. And honestly, I'd be right there with him, backing him up all the way. And that's when my mom went into full panic mode. She started begging me, saying, "You wouldn't do that to your own family, would you?" It was like she was trying to guilt trip me into dropping everything. But I wasn't having it. I mean, they weren't even sorry for what they did. They were just sorry they got caught. And of course, instead of admitting they screwed up, my dad started blaming me again. He was like, "If you had just told us the car wasn't yours, none of this would have happened. You should have been honest with us from the start." I wanted to scream. Like, how is this my fault? They sold a car without asking and somehow that's on me? I told him straight up. This isn't about me lying. It's about you thinking it's okay to sell something that isn't yours. That's not normal. But he just shook his head like I was the one who didn't get it. "We did this for your sister. She needed the help." That's when I realized something. My parents weren't going to fix this. They weren't going to apologize. They were just going to dig their heels in and pretend they were in the right because they did it for family. As if that somehow makes it okay to screw me over. After that call, I sat in the hotel room with Patricia, going over everything that had happened. He was trying to stay calm, but I could see he was just as upset as I was. And he had every right to be. I mean, this was his car we were talking about. I was just caught in the middle of it. But he was the one who had to deal with the fact that his car had been sold without his permission. It wasn't fair. We started talking about what our options were. Patricia was ready to press charges, and honestly, I didn't see any other way. We tried being reasonable. We tried asking them to fix it. But they were acting like it wasn't a big deal. Like selling someone else's property was just something that could be forgiven because they were family. It wasn't just about the car anymore, though. It was about respect. My parents didn't respect me. They didn't respect Patricia. They just thought they could do whatever they wanted, and I'd roll over and take it because that's what I've always done. But this time was different. This time, they crossed a line, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Patricia decided to call his lawyer and get the ball rolling on the legal side of things. I didn't want it to come to that, but at the same time, what choice did we have? My parents had already shown they weren't going to fix it on their own. So if this was what it took to get the car back, then so be it. Later that evening, I got another phone call from my mom. I thought maybe, just maybe, she had come to her senses. Maybe she realized how badly they had messed up and was ready to do the right thing. But nope, she was just calling to ask me to talk to Patricia and convince him not to press charges. "We can't afford a legal battle," she said. I almost laughed. "You can afford to sell a car and give the money to my sister, but you can't afford to deal with the consequences of your actions?" I asked. She started crying, talking about how they didn't mean to hurt me, how they were just trying to help my sister. It was like she didn't even hear what I was saying. I told her straight up, "This isn't about my sister. This is about you guys taking something that didn't belong to you and thinking it's okay because you're family. You're not getting out of this one, Mom. You need to get the car back or Patricia's pressing charges, and there's nothing I can do about it." She just kept crying, saying she didn't know what to do. I almost felt bad for her, But then I remembered how she didn't feel bad when she sold Patricia's car without even thinking twice. She didn't feel bad when she gave the money to my sister. She only felt bad now because she was caught. I hung up the phone, knowing that things were never going to be the same with my parents. They had shown their true colors, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. I wasn't their priority. I was just an afterthought, someone who could take the fall so my sister could have her self-care vacation. Patricia and I spent the rest of the night talking about what to do next. We knew the legal stuff was going to be a mess, but it was the only way. My parents weren't going to fix this on their own, and we weren't going to let them off the hook. I didn't know what the next few weeks were going to bring, but one thing was clear. Things between me and my parents would never be the same again. Update 1. After the phone call with my mom, Patricia and I knew we were past the point of no return. The way my parents had brushed off the whole situation made it clear they weren't going to make this easy. And honestly, at that point, I didn't want easy. I wanted fair. I wanted them to take responsibility for what they did. Patricia and I decided to drive back to my parents' house to try one last time to talk some sense into them. Not for them, though. This was for me. I needed to look them in the eyes and make sure they understood the mess they'd caused. Plus, I had a feeling they were probably sitting there, hoping I'd just drop it and go away. I wasn't about to let that happen. When we pulled into the driveway, my heart was pounding. Patricia parked the SUV and we sat there for a minute, not saying anything. I could feel the tension between us, not because we were mad at each other, but because this whole situation was so ridiculous. I couldn't believe I was about to walk into my parents' house and basically beg them to fix a mistake they made. "I'm ready if you are," Patricia finally said, breaking the silence. He was being way calmer than I felt, and honestly, I was grateful for that. I don't know if I could have handled this without him backing me up. We got out and rang the doorbell. My dad answered, and as soon as he saw us, I could tell he wasn't expecting me to be there for this. He looked me up and down like I was supposed to apologize or something, like I had done something wrong. "You back to talk some sense into your boyfriend?" he asked, not even looking at Patricia. The tone in his voice, condescending, like he was in control, was enough to set me off. But I held back, because this wasn't about fighting. Not yet, anyway. "No, we're here to talk about the car," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I wasn't here to play games. "You've already caused enough problems," he said, stepping aside to let us in, but not before throwing one more comment out there. "Maybe you should have thought about all this before you lied to us." I could feel Patricia stiffen next to me, but I squeezed his hand to remind him to stay calm. We weren't going to get anywhere by yelling. We walked into the living room, and my mom was sitting on the couch, looking all nervous like she had been crying. My guess was she'd spent the last hour trying to convince herself they were the victims here. She didn't even say hello. She just looked at us like we were bringing bad news into her house, instead of coming to fix the mess she helped create. "Mom, Dad, we need to talk." "Seriously," I started, sitting down across from them. Patricia stayed standing, his arms crossed, clearly not interested in wasting time. "We've already explained everything," my mom said softly, trying to act like the wounded party. "What more do you want us to say?" "We want the car back," Patricia cut in, his voice firm. "You sold something that didn't belong to you. You can't just shrug and say it's fine because it's family. You need to fix this." My dad rolled his eyes, which pissed me off immediately. "We're trying to fix it, but we already gave the money to your sister, and we don't want to take that away from her. You know how hard things have been for her." The fact that they kept bringing my sister into this was starting to get on my nerves. She wasn't the one who messed up. They were. But they kept acting like they couldn't take responsibility because it would hurt her feelings. I wasn't going to let them keep hiding behind her like some kind of shield. "I don't care about her vacation," I snapped. "This isn't about her. This is about the car. You need to get it back." My dad crossed his arms, looking all annoyed. "You're being unreasonable. It's not like you can't afford another one. You're doing well, aren't you?" I couldn't believe it. Doing well? That's what this was about? They thought because I wasn't struggling financially, it was okay to just steal something from me? I felt my face getting hot, and I knew I was about to lose it. "That's not the point," I yelled, standing up. "This is about respect. You took something that wasn't yours and sold it without even thinking about what it meant to me or Patricia. You don't get to decide what I can or can't afford. You don't get to make that call." My mom started crying again, of course. "We didn't mean to hurt you. We were just trying to help your sister. She's had such a hard time, and you've always been so independent. We thought you'd understand." "Understand what? That you thought it was okay to lie to me and steal from Patricia? Because that's what you did. You didn't sell my car, you sold his car, and you didn't even ask. At this point, Patricia finally spoke up again. Look, this doesn't have to get ugly. We just want the car back. Get in touch with the guy you sold it to, offer him the money, and we'll move on. But if you don't, I will press charges. And I don't want to do that, but I will. My dad stood up, clearly pissed off. You think you can just come into my house and make demands? Who do you think you are? You're not family. You're just some guy dating my daughter. I swear, Patricia handled it better than I would have. He stayed calm, even though I could tell he was furious. I'm the guy whose car you stole. That's who I am. There was this tense silence. My mom looked at my dad like she was begging him to back down, but he wasn't having it. He was too stubborn. I could see that now. He wasn't going to admit he was wrong. Not ever. Not even to save his own skin. We're not doing this, my dad finally said, shaking his head. If you want the car back so bad, take us to court. But I'm not giving in to your threats. I looked at Patricia and he nodded. That was it. We'd tried to be civil, but they left us no choice. Fine, I said, grabbing my bag and standing up. We'll see you in court then. As we walked out, my mom called after me, saying something about how we were making a big mistake and how she never thought I'd turn on them like this. But I didn't turn around. I didn't look back. Patricia and I got into his car, and as we drove away, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't about the car anymore. This was about respect, and they were about to learn that the hard way. Update 2. So after leaving my parents' house that day, Patricia and I were dead set on pressing charges. We tried to be civil, to give them a chance to fix things, but they blew it. I was mentally preparing myself for the mess that was about to unfold with lawyers, court dates, and all that. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, I got a call from someone I really didn't expect to hear from, my sister. Now, a little backstory on my sister. We haven't been close for years. She lives out of state, rarely visits, and honestly, we're more like acquaintances than siblings at this point. She's the golden child in my parents' eyes, and I've just learned to live with it. But her calling me now? That was weird. I hadn't even spoken to her since this whole car situation blew up. At first, I ignored the call. I was already drained from everything that had happened, and I didn't feel like getting into more family drama. But she kept calling, over and over, until finally I answered just to get it over with. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice neutral. She didn't even bother with small talk. What the hell is going on? She demanded. Mom and Dad just called me saying you're threatening to sue them. What are you doing? I swear I could feel my blood pressure rise instantly, the nerve of her calling me and acting like I was the problem here. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. They sold Patricia's car, I said, without asking. They gave you the money, by the way, so you should probably know that. There was this pause on the other end of the line, and then she hit me with it. So what? You can't just take them to court over something like this. They're our parents. You need to let it go. I had to laugh. I couldn't help it. Let it go? Are you serious? They sold something that didn't belong to them. That's illegal. This isn't just some misunderstanding, like they want you to think. She got defensive right away. They were just trying to help me out. I've been going through a lot and they didn't want to use their own savings. What's the big deal? It's just a car. That's when I lost it. It's not just a car. It's about them not respecting me or Patricia. They think they can do whatever they want, and we're just supposed to smile and nod because it's family. But this time they crossed the line. She was quiet for a second, and I could tell she didn't really care about what I was saying. She just wanted me to stop causing trouble for our parents. Then she tried to guilt trip me. You've always had it easier, she said, like that was supposed to mean something to me. You've got a good job, a good boyfriend. You don't need the money like I do. Mom and Dad thought you'd understand. I was done. You think this is about money? It's about them stealing from Patricia and then blaming me for it. And now you're calling me, acting like I'm the bad guy? You know what? I don't care what you think. This isn't your problem. This is between me, Patricia, and our parents, so stay out of it. She didn't like that at all. You're being selfish, she snapped. They raised you, they've done so much for you, and this is how you repay them? I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had no clue what I'd been through with them, how I'd always been treated like the one who had to understand everyone else's problems. I wasn't their priority, not ever. But now, when they were in trouble, suddenly it was all about family and how much I owed them. I don't owe them anything, I said firmly. And I definitely don't owe you an explanation. I'm done with this conversation. Before she could say anything else, I hung up and immediately blocked her number. I didn't need that kind of negativity in my life, especially not now. Patricia, who had been sitting next to me the whole time, just shook his head. You okay? he asked, clearly knowing I wasn't. Yeah, I said, even though I wasn't. It's just, she doesn't get it. None of them do. Patricia nodded, but he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He knew this was bigger than the car. It was about years of being the one who had to let things slide while my sister got everything handed to her. It was about my parents always assuming I'd be fine, that I'd take care of myself because I was doing well. But this time, I wasn't going to just let it go. This time, I was standing up for myself. And for Patricia. He deserved better than to have his car sold off like it was nothing, and I deserved better than to be treated like an afterthought. Later that night, we sat down and talked through the next steps. Patricia was still set on pressing charges, and honestly, I was too. But before we did that, we decided to give my parents one last chance to make it right. I knew it was probably pointless, but a small part of me was hoping they'd finally realize how badly they'd messed up. We drove back to their house the next morning, and I was dreading it the whole way there. I didn't know what to expect, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to go well. When we rang the doorbell, my dad answered again. This time, he didn't even try to hide his irritation. "What do you want now?" he snapped. Patricia stepped forward. "We're giving you one last chance," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Either you get the car back, or we're going to court. Your choice." My dad's face turned red, and I could see him clenching his fists. "You think you can come in here and make demands?" he growled. "This is my house, and you don't tell me what to do." I sighed. This was exactly what I expected. They weren't going to back down. They never did. "Dad, we're not here to fight," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "We just want the car back. That's it. If you can't do that, then we have no choice." My mom appeared in the doorway then, looking all teary-eyed again. "Please," she begged, "don't do this. We're family." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I was doing something wrong. I just felt tired. Tired of being the one who had to understand. Tired of being the one who had to let things go for the sake of family. "This isn't about family," I said quietly. "It's about respect. And you lost mine the second you sold that car." We turned and walked away, leaving them standing there. As we drove off, I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. I knew this wasn't the end, but for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally standing up for myself. Update 3. After that last visit to my parents' house, I knew things were over. There wasn't going to be any fixing this. They'd made their decision, and so had I. But what happened next wasn't something I saw coming. A couple of days went by with no word from them. No calls, no texts, nothing. Patricia and I were ready to move forward with legal action, and while it still felt a bit surreal to be in that position, we had both come to terms with it. But then, out of nowhere, my phone rang again. It was an unknown number this time. I almost didn't answer, figuring it was some random telemarketer, but something told me to pick it up. Turns out, it was the guy who bought Patricia's car. Now, I have no idea how this dude got my number, but he was calling to let me know that my parents had reached out to him. Apparently, they were trying to get the car back, offering him more money than he originally paid. That part made sense. What didn't make sense was what he told me next. "They're saying that the car's theirs, but something didn't sit right with me," the guy said over the phone. I looked into the paperwork more closely and saw that the title's still in someone else's name. Patricia's, I'm guessing? I sat there stunned. So not only had my parents sold the car without my permission, but they had done it without even transferring the title properly. It was still Patricia's car, legally, and they hadn't even noticed, or didn't care enough to fix it. I explained the situation to the guy on the phone, how my parents had sold it without asking, how Patricia was pressing charges, the whole deal. He listened quietly, and when I finished, he sighed. "I had a feeling something was off," he said. "Look, I don't want to be involved in any legal mess, so I'm willing to give the car back if you guys cover what I paid for it." I told him I'd have to talk to Patricia, but honestly, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders just knowing the car could be returned. When I hung up, I immediately told Patricia what happened, and he was on board with the plan. We'd get the car back, pay the guy what he was owed, and call off the lawsuit. It seemed like the cleanest way to get out of this mess. So we set up a time to meet the guy and retrieve the car. When we got there, everything went smoothly. He handed over the keys, we paid him, and just like that, Patricia's SUV was back where it belonged. It was a relief, but it didn't erase the damage my parents had caused. As we drove away, Patricia turned to me. "What now?" he asked, and I knew he wasn't just talking about the car. What now was the big question. My parents had crossed a line, and even though we got the car back, the trust was shattered. I didn't see how we could come back from this. I thought about it for a while, but eventually I said, I think I'm done with them. Patricia didn't say anything for a moment, just nodded like he understood. And honestly, he probably did. He had been right there with me through all of it, watching how my parents put my sister first and treated me like a backup plan. He knew that this wasn't just about the car, it was about a lifetime of being second place in my own family. The next day, I blocked my parents' numbers. I didn't want to hear their excuses anymore, didn't want to deal with the guilt trips or the crying, or whatever else they thought might change my mind. I was done. A week passed, and for the first time in forever, things were quiet. I didn't realize how much space my parents took up in my head until they weren't there anymore. It felt weird at first, but then it felt freeing. I could finally focus on my own life, on my relationship with Patricia, without the constant pressure of trying to please my family. But of course, that didn't last long. A few days later, I got a text from my aunt, who I hadn't spoken to in ages. She wanted to know what was going on between me and my parents, saying they were devastated and didn't understand why I was shutting them out. I didn't reply. I knew that if I did, it would just turn into more drama. My parents were good at playing the victim, and I wasn't about to get sucked back in. Then, out of nowhere, my sister texted me. I hadn't heard from her since that last blow-up on the phone, so seeing her name pop up on my screen made my stomach drop. I didn't want to deal with her, but part of me was curious, so I opened the message. You seriously blocked Mom and Dad? What's wrong with you? That was it. No apology, no attempt to understand my side of things, just more blame. I didn't even bother replying. I blocked her too. Patricia and I decided to take a trip to clear our heads. We packed up the car, the real car this time, and hit the road for a few days. It wasn't a big vacation or anything, just a little getaway to remind ourselves that life didn't have to be full of drama and chaos. It was nice to get some distance from everything, to spend time with the one person who had been solid through all of this. On the way back home, I thought a lot about the whole situation with my parents. Part of me was still sad about how things turned out. I mean, no one really wants to cut off their family. But at the same time, I knew it was the right choice. My parents weren't going to change. They would always put my sister first, always expect me to just deal with whatever nonsense they threw at me because that's what I'd always done. But not anymore. When we got back from the trip, I felt different. Lighter. Like I had finally let go of something that had been weighing me down for years. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done letting my parents control my life. I was done being the backup plan, the one who had to understand and make sacrifices for everyone else. And honestly, it felt pretty damn good. My sister slept with my ex and got pregnant. Then my family demanded I give up my inheritance. All right, so here's how it all started. I'm 24 now, but this whole mess began a couple of years ago. Back then, I was in this relationship with a guy I met in college. Let's call him Jake. We hit it off pretty quickly. He seemed nice, thoughtful, and we had a lot in common. At first, things were going great. I mean, I was head over heels for him, and I thought this was the guy I was going to marry one day. So naturally, after about a year together, I decided it was time to introduce him to my family. Now, my family's a little, let's say, traditional. We're from a pretty conservative culture, and they have strong opinions about who you should date, how you should date, and when you should get married. They weren't thrilled when they met Jake. It wasn't like they were rude to him or anything, but I could tell they didn't really like him either. They didn't say much, just kind of gave me that, "Are you sure about this guy?" Look, I brushed it off, thinking they'd come around eventually. But here's the thing. While my parents were lukewarm about Jake, my sisters seemed to love him. Grace, who's 22, and Emma, who's only 11, got along with him great. That made me happy because, family approval matters even if it's just my sisters. Grace especially seemed to really enjoy his company, and we even joked that she was stealing my boyfriend. Emma adored him too, but she's just a kid, so it didn't feel weird. Jake and I didn't live together because in my culture, that's a huge no-no unless you're married. So we worked in different cities and would meet up when we could, but I thought things were solid between us. I trusted him completely. Why wouldn't I? He was my boyfriend, and he seemed to get along with the people closest to me. What could go wrong, right? Well, 3 months after Jake met my family, things took a turn. I was over at his place for the weekend. We'd had a normal day, nothing special. Grabbed food, watched a movie, the usual. He went to take a shower and his phone buzzed. Now, I'm not the type to go snooping through someone's phone. I really believe that if you trust someone, there's no need for that. But something that day just didn't sit right with me. His phone kept buzzing, and I don't know why, but I picked it up. Maybe part of me already knew something was off, or maybe I was just curious. When I unlocked it, I saw a message from Grace. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, she's my sister. But when I opened the chat, my heart basically stopped. The messages weren't normal. They were flirty, like let's hook up level flirty. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My sister and my boyfriend? I started scrolling up through the conversation, and it got worse. There were months of this stuff, late night messages, inside jokes that I didn't know about, and even plans to meet up behind my back. I felt sick. Like, how long had this been going on? The person I trusted most and my own sister? I took screenshots of everything. My hands were shaking and I couldn't think straight, but I knew I needed proof. I sent the screenshots to myself and just left his place without saying a word. I didn't wait for him to get out of the shower. I didn't give him the chance to explain or lie to me. I just bolted. As soon as I got home, my phone started blowing up with calls and texts from Jake. He must have realized something was wrong when he saw that I'd left. I ignored everything. I couldn't even look at my phone without wanting to scream. Eventually, I sent the screenshots to our friend group's chat and blocked him. I didn't care about the fallout at that point. I was done. I had no patience for lies or betrayal. But what hit me the hardest was Grace. I mean, Jake's betrayal hurt like hell. But Grace? That was another level of pain. She wasn't just my sister, we grew up practically inseparable. With our parents being absent and wrapped up in their own world most of the time, Grace and I had always leaned on each other. We were only 2 years apart, and we had always been there for each other. Or so I thought. The next morning, I couldn't take it anymore. I packed a bag and flew straight back home to confront her. I didn't care what kind of scene I was about to make. This was bigger than just a fight. It felt like my whole world was crashing down. When I walked into my parents' house, Grace was there like nothing had happened, just sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling on her phone. I slammed the screenshots down on the table in front of her. Our mom and dad were both there too. Grace didn't even try to deny it. She just looked at the messages and shrugged like it was no big deal. She actually said, "Yeah, I did it. So what?" I wanted to scream. How could she act like this didn't matter? Like she hadn't just destroyed our relationship for good. My mom lost it. She slapped Grace across the face, something I had never seen her do. My dad was furious too, yelling at Grace, telling her to get out of the house. He gave her a week to move out, and I thought that was it. I thought maybe this was the end of all the drama. But 2 days later, Grace dropped another bomb on us. She was pregnant, with Jake's baby. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This had gone from bad to worse in a matter of days. My parents, who had been so angry with her, suddenly softened up. They couldn't stay mad at her once they knew she was pregnant. And just like that, the whole dynamic shifted. It was like Grace was off the hook just because she was having a baby. My parents started talking about how they couldn't abandon her now, how they had to support her, no matter what she did. That's when I snapped. I told them all exactly what I thought, how they were enabling her, how this was all messed up. They tried to tell me to calm down, that I was overreacting, but I couldn't take it anymore. I grabbed my stuff, told them to never contact me again, and I left. The only one I didn't block was Emma. She's just a kid, and I didn't want to cut her off too. 2 weeks later, my mom somehow got a new number and sent me a wedding invitation. Jake and Grace were getting married, and my mom had the nerve to act like I should be there for family unity or whatever. I told her to get lost and blocked her again. That's how it all began. I thought the worst was behind me, but little did I know the real mess was only getting started. After all that went down with Grace, my ex, and my parents, I thought cutting them off would give me some peace. Turns out life had other plans. I wasn't speaking to anyone except Emma, and I was trying to just move forward with my life, you know? But of course, things never go that smoothly when you've got a family like mine. About 2 months after I blocked everyone, I started hearing things through the grapevine. A cousin of mine, who I stayed in touch with, mentioned that Grace was having a baby shower and my parents were throwing it. Apparently, they had invited a ton of people, like it was some huge celebration. At first, I wasn't surprised. I figured they'd make a big deal about it since they were acting like Grace was some kind of victim. But then, my cousin hit me with something that really got under my skin. She told me they had started telling people that I was the one who abandoned the family, and Grace was the good daughter who was trying to keep the family together. Seriously? After everything she did, she was somehow the hero of this story now? I was so mad, I wanted to call my mom and just let her have it. But I knew better than to get dragged back into all that. I stayed quiet, tried to keep my head down, but that didn't mean I wasn't fuming on the inside. The nerve they had to spin this whole thing around like I was the problem. A few days later, I got a text from Emma. She was just giving me an update on how things were going at home, but she also dropped something I wasn't ready for. My mom had apparently been going around telling people that I needed to get married soon. Not for any real reason, just because she didn't want people gossiping about how Grace, the younger sister, was getting married and having a kid before me. Like what? I hadn't even spoken to them in months, and now they were worried about my reputation? It was ridiculous, but that's how my mom's mind worked. Everything was about appearances. She didn't care about what Grace did to me. No, the bigger issue was how it looked to other people. I wasn't living my life on her timeline, and that was apparently some huge scandal. And yeah, that made me furious. But more than that, it made me sad. It was like nothing I ever did was going to be enough for them. Even when I cut them off, they still found a way to control the narrative to make me look like the bad guy. So, fast forward a bit, Grace's wedding happened. Obviously, I didn't go, but I heard all about it from my cousin. Apparently, it was this big, fancy thing. My parents went all out even though Grace was barely a few months pregnant. They made sure to cover up the whole scandal by telling everyone they were just being responsible, getting married quickly so the baby wouldn't be born out of wedlock. My cousin told me my parents were telling everyone I didn't show up because of work commitments. Yeah, right. But you know what really hit me hard? It wasn't just that they were lying to cover up their own embarrassment. It was that they were still pretending everything was perfect. Like, they couldn't even admit that their family was falling apart. They couldn't just be real about what was happening. Instead, they had to put on this fake show for everyone else. I was done with them at this point, but hearing about all this still stung. It was like they were erasing me from the family narrative completely. Anyway, time passed and I tried to move on. I threw myself into work and focused on building a life for myself. For a while, things were quiet. I wasn't hearing much from my family, and I figured maybe they had finally just left me alone. But of course, that's not how it works in my family. One night, I got a call from Emma. It was late and I was about to go to bed, but something about the way the phone rang gave me a bad feeling. When I picked up, Emma was crying. She could barely get the words out, but eventually she told me that our dad had passed away. I was stunned. I mean, I didn't have the best relationship with him, but still, he was my dad. What really pissed me off, though, was that it was Emma who had to call me. My mom didn't even bother. I hadn't heard a word from her. Emma told me that our dad had been sick for a while, but they hadn't told me. My mom decided to keep it from me because she didn't want to stress me out. Can you believe that? My own father was sick, and they didn't think I had the right to know? The next morning, I booked a flight back home. I didn't care about all the drama anymore. I just wanted to be there for Emma. When I showed up at my parents' house, it was like walking into a battlefield. My mom and Grace were there, and the first thing they did when they saw me was start yelling. They accused me of only coming back for the money, like that was the only reason I'd want to be there. Grace was especially nasty, calling me selfish, saying I abandoned them when they needed me most. I didn't even get the chance to grieve. Everyone was so focused on the inheritance, on who was getting what, that they barely even talked about Dad. It was disgusting. And as if things weren't bad enough, when they read the will, all hell broke loose. Turns out, Dad had left me the largest share of his assets. I was shocked. I wasn't expecting anything from him, especially after how things had gone down. But there it was, in writing. I got 40%, Emma got 30%, Mom got 20%, and Grace, she got 10%. You'd think I'd feel relieved, right? Like finally, some justice. But honestly, it just made things worse. Grace and her husband lost it. They started demanding that I give up my share, saying I didn't deserve it, that Grace needed the money more because of her kid. They even threatened to take me to court over it. I knew they didn't have a legal leg to stand on, but the fact that they were willing to go that far just showed how greedy they were. It was all about money to them. They didn't care about family or what was right. They just wanted to get their hands on whatever they could. I told them I wasn't giving up anything. And that's when things got nasty. Grace's husband started making threats, saying I'd regret it if I didn't do what they wanted. I knew it was all just talk, but still, it was unsettling. I was already dealing with the loss of my dad, and now I had to put up with this crap on top of it? It was too much. After the will reading, I went back to my hotel to clear my head. I thought about everything that had happened, all the lies, the betrayal, the greed, and I realized something. I wasn't going to let them push me around anymore. I'd spent too long letting my family control my life, and it was time to stand up for myself. Update 1. So, after the whole inheritance blow-up, I thought things couldn't possibly get worse. I mean, they already accused me of coming back just for the money, and Grace and her husband were trying to bully me into giving up my share. But I wasn't going to budge. I knew I had the legal right to what my dad left me, and honestly, After everything they put me through, there was no way I was giving in. Anyway, a couple of days after the will reading, I got a message from my lawyer. We had a meeting scheduled to go over some more details about the estate, and honestly, I just wanted to get it over with. I was tired of all the drama and just wanted to settle everything so I could go back to my life. But when I got to the lawyer's office, he hit me with something I wasn't expecting. Turns out, my dad had written me a letter before he passed away. The lawyer handed it to me and said that my dad had asked him to give it to me when the time was right. I sat there for a minute, just staring at the envelope, not sure if I even wanted to open it. I had so many mixed feelings about my dad, like, yeah, he left me the largest share in the will, but he also never really stood up for me when all the crap with Grace went down. I was angry with him, but at the same time I missed him. It's hard to explain. So I finally opened the letter. It wasn't long, just a couple of paragraphs, but what he said kind of hit me. He apologized for not being there for me when I needed him. He said he knew he should have done more, but he felt trapped by the situation with my mom and Grace. He admitted he had regrets, especially about how things ended between us. Reading that, I didn't know whether to cry or be angry. Part of me felt a little bit of closure, but another part of me was just pissed that he didn't say any of this while he was alive. After reading the letter, the lawyer and I went over a few more things about the estate, but my mind was elsewhere. I couldn't stop thinking about how different things might have been if my dad had just spoken up sooner. If he had stood up for me instead of staying silent, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess right now. But it was too late for all that, and there was nothing I could do to change the past. On my way back to the hotel, I got a call from Emma. She was really upset because apparently Grace had been saying some pretty nasty things about me around town. She was telling people that I was trying to steal the inheritance and that I was turning the family against her. I wasn't surprised, honestly. Grace always knew how to play the victim and make herself look like the innocent one. But it still hurt to hear that she was spreading lies about me. When I got back to the hotel, I decided to take a break from all the drama and spend some time with Emma. I picked her up, and we went out for dinner. We talked about everything that had been happening, and I tried to reassure her that none of this was her fault. She was just caught in the middle of all this, and I hated that she had to deal with it. But the next day, things took another turn for the worse. I woke up to a bunch of missed calls and texts from unknown numbers. At first, I thought it was just spam, but then I started reading the messages. They were all threatening, calling me names, and accusing me of trying to tear the family apart. Someone even said they were going to make me pay if I didn't back down. I had no idea who was behind it, but I had a feeling Grace's husband was involved. He had already threatened me once, and I wouldn't put it past him to try something like this. I forwarded everything to my lawyer, just in case things escalated. But honestly, it was starting to get really scary. It's one thing to deal with family drama, but when people start making threats, it's a whole other level. Later that afternoon, I went to my car, only to find that someone had slashed my tires. All four of them. I was completely freaked out at this point. I mean, who does that? I knew Grace and her husband were angry, but this felt way too extreme. It was like they were willing to go to any lengths to get what they wanted. I called the police and filed a report, but I didn't have much hope that they'd catch whoever did it. Still, I wasn't going to let them intimidate me. I was already dealing with enough, and the last thing I needed was to be scared every time I walked out the door. I talked to the hotel staff, and they beefed up security around the property, so that made me feel a little better. But it was clear this wasn't going to end anytime soon. A few days later, we had another meeting with the lawyer to finalize some things with the estate. Grace and her husband were there, and the tension in the room was thick. They barely said a word to me, but the glares they were giving me said enough. At the end of the meeting, Grace's husband pulled me aside and told me I was making a huge mistake by not giving up my share. He said I'd regret it and that this wasn't over. I didn't even bother responding. I just walked away. I wasn't going to let him scare me into doing something I didn't want to do, but deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of it. Grace and her husband weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted, and I had to be prepared for whatever came next. That night, I sat down and thought about everything that had happened since my dad passed. The lies, the threats, the vandalism. It was all so exhausting. I just wanted it to be over. I wanted to move on with my life and leave all this behind. But I knew that wasn't going to happen as long as Grace and her husband were around. Still, I wasn't going to give up. I'd been through too much to let them push me around now. They could make all the threats they wanted, but I wasn't backing down. This was my life, my inheritance, and I was going to fight for what was mine. and if they thought they could scare me into submission, they were in for a rude awakening. Update 2. Things didn't calm down after that last meeting with the lawyer. If anything, they got worse. Grace and her husband were getting more and more desperate, and honestly, it was starting to feel like I was in the middle of some bad movie. The threats kept coming, the nasty texts from random numbers didn't stop, and I was just mentally drained. One night, about a week after the tire slashing incident, I was heading back to the hotel after dinner with Emma. She had been staying over with me for a few days, which was honestly a relief. It was nice to have someone on my side in all this mess. We were walking through the lobby when I noticed this guy just standing there, watching us. At first I thought maybe he was just some random person waiting for someone, but when we passed by, he followed us. I tried not to freak out, but the whole situation had me on edge already. We got into the elevator, and as soon as the doors closed, I looked at Emma. "Did you see that guy?" I asked. She nodded, looking just as nervous as I felt. Yeah, he was staring at us. We got to our room, and I immediately called the front desk to report the guy. They said they'd check the cameras and send someone up to patrol the floor, but still, it didn't make me feel much better. This whole thing was getting way too close for comfort. I couldn't shake the feeling that Grace's husband was behind this somehow. I mean, who else would go to these lengths just to scare me? That night, I barely slept. Every little noise had me jumping out of bed, convinced someone was trying to break in or worse. It was like living in a nightmare, and all I could think about was how to make it stop. The next morning, I decided I needed to take some serious action. I called my lawyer and told him everything about the threats, the weird guy in the lobby, the slashed tires. He agreed that things were getting out of hand and suggested we get a restraining order against Grace's husband. It wasn't something I wanted to do, but at that point, it felt like the only option. We filed the paperwork the next day, and I tried to keep my head down while we waited for the court date. But of course, Grace and her husband didn't take the news well. The texts ramped up again, this time with more threats about how I'd regret this, and how they'd make sure I paid for everything. It was exhausting, but I was done being scared. They could throw whatever they wanted at me, but I wasn't giving in. A few days later, the court date for the restraining order came around. I showed up with my lawyer, and guess who else was there? Grace and her husband, of course. They looked smug, like they thought this whole thing was a joke. I avoided eye contact with them, focusing on what my lawyer was saying, but I could feel their eyes on me the whole time. When the judge called us up, Grace's husband tried to act like I was the one causing all the drama. He said I was exaggerating everything, that I was just bitter about the inheritance and trying to make his life hell. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Like, really? He slashes my tires, sends me threats, and somehow I'm the one causing problems? Thankfully, the judge saw through his BS. After hearing both sides, they granted the restraining order, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a small sense of relief. At least now there was something in place to protect me if things got worse. But of course, things didn't magically get better overnight. The threats didn't stop right away, and I still felt like I was constantly looking over my shoulder. But at least now I had the law on my side, and that gave me some peace of mind. A few weeks passed, and I was finally starting to feel like maybe things were settling down. I was still staying in the hotel, but I had started looking for a new apartment where I could feel safer. Emma had gone back home, and I missed her, but we kept in touch constantly. She was still dealing with the fallout from all the family drama, but at least she wasn't stuck in the middle of it as much as I was. Then, one morning I woke up to a message from an unknown number. It wasn't a threat this time, though, it was a link. I hesitated for a second before clicking on it, and what I saw made my stomach drop. Someone had created a whole website dedicated to trashing me. I'm talking lies, half-truths, and just pure nastiness. They were painting me as this selfish, greedy person who was tearing the family apart. There were even photos of me from the funeral, looking cold and heartless, according to the captions. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. This was next-level crazy. I immediately called my lawyer and sent him the link. He told me to screenshot everything, which I did, and then we started the process of getting the website taken down. It was just another reminder that Grace and her husband weren't going to stop until they got what they wanted. But at this point, I was so tired, I didn't even care what they threw at me anymore. I just wanted it to be over. That night, I talked to Emma again. She was upset about the website and wanted to help, but there wasn't much she could do. I didn't want her getting caught up in all this any more than she already was. We talked for a while, and she told me about how Grace had been acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't caused any of this. Typical Grace, always playing the victim. I went to bed that night feeling drained, but at least I had a plan in place. The website would get taken down, The restraining order was in effect, and I had people on my side. I wasn't alone in this, even though it felt like it sometimes. The next day, I woke up to an email from my lawyer saying the website had been taken down. Finally, some good news. It felt like a small victory in this endless battle, but I'd take what I could get. I knew Grace and her husband weren't going to give up easily, but at least now I had some control over the situation. As I sat in my hotel room that morning, sipping on my coffee and trying to wrap my head around everything that had happened, I realized something. I wasn't scared anymore. I was angry, yes, but the fear that had been hanging over me for weeks had started to fade. I wasn't going to let them control my life anymore. They could try all they wanted to drag me down, but I wasn't backing down. Not now. Not ever. Update 3. So here we are at the final stretch, and I thought maybe things were going to finally settle down after the court win. But nope, my family drama had other plans. I mean, I knew Grace and her husband weren't going to back off that easily, but even I couldn't have guessed how far they'd take it this time. It started about 2 weeks after the court hearing. I was starting to feel a little more relaxed, like I could finally breathe again without constantly looking over my shoulder. I was even thinking about moving out of the hotel and into an apartment, something more permanent. But then, something weird happened. One morning, I got a package delivered to my hotel. It didn't have a return address, which should have been my first clue that something was off. I opened it up, and inside was this old, beat-up notebook. At first, I thought it was just junk. Maybe some random person sent the wrong package or something. But then I opened it up, and that's when things got creepy. The entire notebook was filled with handwritten notes about me. I'm talking pages and pages of scribbled messages, all about my life, my family, and even things about my dad's will. Some of the notes were dates and times of where I'd been, who I'd been with, even places I'd gone with Emma. Someone had been keeping tabs on me, and it was all laid out right there in front of me. I felt a chill go down my spine. Who would send me this? Was it some sort of twisted intimidation tactic from Grace's husband? I mean, they'd already tried the threats, the vandalism, even the weird phone calls. But this was different. This felt way more personal, like someone was watching me, tracking my every move. I called my lawyer immediately and sent him photos of the notebook. He was just as freaked out as I was and told me to report it to the police, which I did. They took the notebook as evidence, but I wasn't holding my breath for anything to come of it. The police had their hands full with a million other things, and honestly, I didn't think they'd figure out who was behind this anytime soon. After that, I tried to keep a low profile, staying in my hotel room most of the time and only going out when I absolutely had to. Emma was still calling me regularly, and she was worried too. She had no idea who could be behind the notebook either, but she suspected Grace's husband, just like I did. Then, one evening, as I was heading back to my room after grabbing some food, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. That same guy from the hotel lobby weeks ago, the one who had been watching Emma and me, was back. He was standing near the elevators, pretending to scroll through his phone, but he was definitely keeping an eye on me. I felt my heart start to race, but I played it cool. I walked right past him, pretending like I didn't notice anything, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. Once I got into my room, I locked the door and immediately called hotel security. They said they'd check the cameras and send someone up to do a sweep of the floor, but honestly, I didn't feel safe there anymore. I called Emma that night and told her everything. She was scared, which made me even more anxious. I hated that she was caught up in all this, that she had to deal with the fallout of Grace's mess. But I promised her I'd be careful, and we made a plan to meet up the next day so we could figure out what to do next. The following day, I met Emma at a cafe downtown, away from the hotel. We sat there for a couple of hours, talking about everything. She told me more about what had been going on with Grace at home, how she was acting like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just tried to take me to court over the will. It was infuriating, but it didn't surprise me. Then Emma dropped something on me that I wasn't ready for. She said Grace's husband had been asking around about my whereabouts, trying to figure out where I was staying. That's when it hit me. The guy at the hotel, the notebook, all of it. They were keeping tabs on me, and they were probably planning something worse. I knew I couldn't stay at the hotel anymore. It wasn't safe, and if Grace's husband had people watching me, it was only a matter of time before things escalated. So, that night, I packed up my things and checked out of the hotel. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Emma, just in case. I booked a room at a different hotel on the other side of town, hoping that would throw them off for a while. The next couple of days were quiet. I didn't hear anything from Grace or her husband, and the weird texts and calls seemed to have stopped. But I wasn't letting my guard down. I knew better than that by now. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my lawyer. He had some news that caught me completely off guard. Grace's husband had been arrested. Apparently, he'd been caught trying to break into my old hotel room. I didn't know what he was planning to do, but whatever it was, he got busted before he could follow through. I felt a mix of relief and anger. Relief that he was finally out of the picture, but anger that it had come to this. I mean, what kind of person goes that far just for some inheritance money? It was insane. The police told me they were investigating, and I'd probably have to go to court again to testify. But at least now I knew I was safe, at least for the time being. After that, things finally started to calm down. The police kept me updated on the case, and my lawyer was confident that Grace's husband wouldn't be able to pull anything like this again, not with the charges he was facing. I moved into a new apartment a few weeks later, somewhere Grace and her husband didn't know about. I kept in touch with Emma, of course, but I made sure she didn't tell anyone where I was living. I wasn't taking any chances. It's been a few months now, and while I'd like to say everything is back to normal, I don't think it ever will be. There's still a part of me that's always on edge, always looking over my shoulder, wondering if Grace or her husband will try something again. But for now, I'm just trying to move on with my life, to rebuild after everything they put me through. Looking back, I can't believe how far this all went. It started with Grace betraying me with my boyfriend, and somehow it escalated into threats, court battles, and restraining orders. But through it all, I've learned something important. I'm stronger than I ever thought I was. And no matter what, I'm never letting anyone take advantage of me again.